Hello everyone, my name is Zudi. I'm one of the Edge Core of NUDC 2021, and throughout this video, I will be explaining about the debrief or post-debate analysis for the motion on round 3 under the heading of Israel and Palestine. So the motion was this House as the current Israeli government would significantly focus on the economic normalization in the Palestinian territories. The info slide was that economic normalization includes, for example, allowing free flow of international goods, services, and reopening airports and seaports. And another point in the info slide was also talking about how the current government in Israel, led by former Defense Minister Naftali Bennett, consists of a wide variety of political stances such as progressive Israelis, moderate Arab Israelis, and conservatives. So there are 4 areas in this debate that the debaters can explore. Number 1 is about the political characterization of current Israeli government. We're going to discuss about moderation versus conservatism. Number 2 is the reaction from domestic Israeli voters. It mainly talks about acceptance versus backlashes. Number 3, reaction from Palestinian authorities, which was going to be talking about leverage elevation versus concession demand. And number 4, last but not least, we're going to be elaborating about international response, which mainly revolve around the discussion of support versus condemnation. So let's go to the first area of the discussion, which is the characterization of current Israeli government. So in the government side of the house, you need to explain that Israeli new government is a product of new coalition government that encompasses a wide range of political ideologies that allow and even demand a more moderate gesture with Palestinian Authority due to 3 reasons. But before we are discussing to these 3 reasons, I think it's important for the debaters to understand what is currently happening in the Israeli politics right now. So just for general information, I think that this kind of knowledge can be used in both government and opposition side, which is to understand that Israeli right now experience a deep political turmoil and political turbulence or political instability that leads into 4 consecutive elections. The election was rampantly being conducted in April 2019, September 2019, March 2020, and March 2021. So these 4 elections were conducted because the government was failed to create a majority and minority political coalitions because of how volatile the composition of political parties in the blocks of opposition and the incumbent government. It's also because there are a lot of competing strong political actors in the Israeli parliament. It's also because of how the ideologies of right-wing, left-wing, and centrists are always going to have these dynamics that makes it quite difficult to have a settled and a kind of rigid political forms in the Israeli politics. So I think that is important to know that we're going to discuss and use this context along the way throughout this discussion. So go back to the 3 reasons why we can have some degree of moderation to the Palestinian with the context of current Israeli government. The first reason is because for the first time in history, the Independent Arab Israeli Party is included as an official member of governing coalition. So the name of this Arab Israeli Party is Ram Party. And the reason why this Arab Israeli Party is included in the governing coalition is because there is an urgency to keep the coalition intact, because there is an extremely slim margin between the incumbent government coalition, which is led by Naftali Bennett, and the opposition coalition in the opposition bloc led by Netanyahu. It's 60 versus 59. So maybe Arab Israeli Party isn't that much in terms of its power. Arab Israeli Party is only having approximately 5 or 4 seats, but because every seat count, and doesn't matter how small you are as a party in the Israeli parliament right now, you are needed by both the incumbent and the opposition to ensure that there is this government majority, to ensure that there is a tiebreaker. So it's important for this Arab-Israeli party, and it's also important for the Naftali Bennett coalition to have the ability to embrace this Arab-Israeli party, meanwhile that they are still minority, to have the winning margin. The second reason is because although the current Prime Minister Naftali Bennett has been described as Israeli militaristic ultranationalist, however, under a rotation government system, in August 2023, he will be continued by Yair Lapid, a moderate pro-negotiation for two-state solution Yesh Atid politician. What does it mean? So there is this agreement between Naftali Bennett, militaristic, ultra-nationalist politician that currently becomes the prime minister, that comes from Yamina party, and is going to be having the administration and leading the administration for the next 2 years, between 2021 until 2023. And between 2023 and 2025, under this agreement, he will be continued by Yair Lapid, which comes from Yesh Atid party, that is more moderate because his party is already committing and have historically pledging to try to build a negotiation in two-state solution with the Palestine. So this is to explain that future moderate behavior might be accepted. So that's the second reason. The third reason is because economic issue right now serve as lowest common denominator or common unifying factor across multi-political ideologies, with the goal of jobs and GDP growth as the primary universal parameter of politicians' performance. That is to say that despite there are a lot of differences between political ideologies, foreign policies, security issues, religious issues with the Palestine across different parties of right-wing, left-wing, and centrist, but they have this common unifying factor, which is to have a good economic growth that is correlated with jobs, employment, investment, opportunities for the people. So this idea of economic normalization could be a sexy issue in the Israeli politics that can bind different political ideologies into a uniting voice. So that's for the government side. In the opposition side, you can still characterize the current Israeli government as a government that represents a largely conservative interest and embodies an expectation to maintain a hostile position against Palestine to secure a cohesive incumbent political blocs. To explain that conservatism is still the way to go for 3 reasons. Reason number 1 is because the current Prime Minister, Naftali Bennett, has been described as an Israeli militaristic ultranationalist, and Bennett describes himself as more right-wing than Benjamin Netanyahu, which was the previous Prime Minister. He even opposes the creation of a Palestinian state in any form possible. He doesn't recognize Palestine as a state. So that is something to be considered, that he is extremely conservative. So people want to have conservative leaders. Number 2 is because although the coalition consists of a wide variety of political stances, as the info slide tells us, the majority of comprising parties, namely Blue and White Party, which comprise of 8 seats in the parliament, Israel Beitenu, 7 seats in the parliament, Labour Party 7 seats in the parliament as well, Yamina Party 6 seats in the parliament, and New Hope 6 seats in the parliament, with a total of 34 out of overall 60 seats of this coalition has some form of Jewish, Zionist, anti-Palestinian cooperation as their value, as their agenda, and as their policy platform. Meanwhile, the other 27-28 seats in the parliament, although it's quite moderate, we're talking about Yesh Atid party, Meretz, and Ram party, which comprise of a lot of Arab Israeli politicians. However, they are not comprised of the majority. That is just to show that conservatism is still a dominant political force in the Israeli politics. Number 3, to prevent Netanyahu's return to power and destabilizing Bennett's coalition, Prime Minister Bennett needs to embrace some form of Netanyahu's Zionist policy platform to provide reassurance to existing Israeli conservative parties. So just to also give you general information, Benjamin Netanyahu was being ousted from his 13 years of prime minister leadership in the Israeli politics, not because people dislike his policies, because a lot of people actually like his policies of being aggressive against Palestine. The reason he was ousted and sort of being coup d'etat by Naftali Bennett is because of his corruption allegation. He was being charged and currently being tried in the Israeli court for the allegation of bribery, fraud, and corruption with the Israeli media companies. So actually people still like to be conservative. People still demand to have a leader that is similar to Benjamin Netanyahu, but obviously less corrupted. And therefore, Prime Minister Bennett needs to embrace some form of this conservative values to still be against any kind of reconciliation and any kind of normalization of relationship with the Palestine, to ensure that these conservative parties that exist in his coalition remains intact and remains staying within Naftali Bennett's political coalition. So this is the discussion about the characterization of current Israeli government that can be used in both government and opposition side. The second area of the discussion is about the reaction from the Israeli voters. In the government, obviously, want to talk about the domestic benefits of having this economic normalization. Meanwhile, in opposition, you want to talk more about potential backlashes of having this deal with the Palestine. So in the government, you can explain that Israel is in need of economic normalization with the Palestine to bolster economic growth. There are 4 reasons to mechanize this. Number 1 is to explain Israeli businessmen are in the dire needs to open up more factories in Palestinian territory and to employ Palestinian laborers to increase economic efficiency, because obviously if you are hiring Palestinian workers, their salary is going to be cheaper in comparison towards the companies hiring employees from the Israeli people, because Israeli people have higher minimum wage and higher living standard. So to increase economic efficiency, to cut costs, Israeli businessmen needs to open up factories that employ the Palestinian laborers. And also when the lucrativity and the profitability of these companies exists because of the ability to cut costs, obviously these companies of Israeli individuals have ability to gain investors' confidence. So having this cooperation with Palestine is extremely important. This is the study case of West Bank territorial annexation that is being done by the Israeli to some important geographical part in the Palestine. If you look into this kind of annexation, it's not that the Israeli individuals just go there and killing all the Palestinians. Some abuse do exist, but most of the time, Israeli people, when they go there and expand their territory through annexation, Israeli individuals also provide job opportunities, provide housing, provide economic benefits for the Palestinian that want to work in the Israeli companies and Israeli factories. That is just to show how in dire needs Israeli businessmen in terms of how Palestinian laborers are important for their businesses. The second reason is to also explain that job absorption in Palestinian territory is crucial, especially because Israel is currently experiencing brain drain problem, in which there is an increase in the immigration level of many of its most productive citizens to the United States and Western countries to find better opportunities. So that is to say that if you as a company in Israel want to get laborers, that probably Palestine would be the best choice, because it is really proximate, it is quite close with your territory, and you have this problem of brain drain. You have the current problem of losing a lot of your population because they fly away to US and other European nations. So it's going to be a good choice if you to accept the employees that come from Palestine. Number 3 is to explain that allowing free flow of International goods will allow competitive pricing and jobs availability in the Palestinian territory, hence increasing the purchasing power of middle-class Palestinian and expanding Israelis' business consumer basis. I think it's quite explanatory, self-explanatory, I mean, because when Palestinians are provided with jobs, now they can save some of their incomes and they can potentially be consumers that buy products from Israeli companies, and that would be a net benefit for Israeli as a state, because it means the revenue of tax of the Israeli companies will be increased and the Israeli government will get benefit from this increase of tax revenue. Number 4, to explain that in particularly COVID-19 era, Israeli needs to acquire and access as many income streams as possible to recover from economic recession. And it means that, yeah, to bounce back from the crisis, to recover from the crisis, you need to have this economic efficiency, you need to have ability to cooperate with as many countries as possible, including Palestine that is really close to you, that have this comparative advantage of productive labors that you can tap into. So those are the 4 reasons why it's economically beneficial for the Israeli domestic citizens. So there will be trust to the Israeli government because the Israeli voters see the benefit of the government doing this economic normalization process. In opposition, you also can explain that what happens is not domestic benefits. What happens is going to be domestic backlashes, because economic growth from normalizing economic relation with Palestinian would not be an optimum one. So this is 3 levels of responses to the arguments of economic benefit from the government side. A, you can explain that other sources of income from Middle Eastern countries, e.g. UAE and Bahrain, still exist. B, Israeli economy focuses on automobile, technology, and e-commerce that mostly already automated. So you don't require a lot of physical labors and people that become the workers in your company, because you already use machine, you already use AI, you already use a lot of robots in the way that you produce your products. And C, the cost of hiring Palestinian workers are exceeding its benefit because of the need to spend a lot of massive capital that required to retrain the workers before they are ready to work, because as we know that a lot of Palestinian individuals were deprived from the educational opportunity because of the injustice done and discrimination done by the Israeli government. Therefore, they don't have and they are not equipped with necessary skills to adapt and competently adjust with the market forces. Therefore, if you want to make Palestinians able to work in your company, you need to retrain them, provide a lot of educations, and provide and spend a lot of money in this process of training these workers, which wouldn't be that lucrative for your company, although there would be some potential benefit, but the cost of retraining is already massive enough for you to take, and the benefit isn't really certain yet. Most importantly, the act of economic normalization with Palestine would also invite domestic backlashes, because the pre-existing Zionist anti-Palestinian narrative entrenched through state curriculum, religious leaders' doctrine, intergenerational familial teaching, and political echo chamber. That is to say, if the government does this economic normalization, then people will dislike the government, people will resent the government, because they afraid that the government is collaborating with Palestine, the actor that these Israeli people hate, because of these numerous reasons that exist in the second point on the opposition side. If you want to have mechanization, how these correlate with the dynamic of political ecosystem in the Israel, you can explain that Netanyahu's opposition party could frame this act to smear Prime Minister Naftali Bennett by narrating his administration as weak, as inconsistent, and betraying Jewish Israeli value for political gain and win votes. So not only this is not a popular policy in the eyes of Israeli voters, but even your political opponent could frame you as a bad government that betray the nation and betray the value of Jewish identity that is being held dearly by Israeli people. So this is just going to be a political suicide for you to do this as Israeli government. So this is the second area of the discussion. The third area of the discussion is to explain and try to explore what is the possible reaction from Palestinian authorities. In the government side of the house, there are two ways that you can explain why the reaction will actually be good. But before that, I think it's important to understand that there are two main groups in the Palestinian authorities that currently have quite strong control in the Palestinian territories. Number one is Hamas. Number two is Fatah. So Hamas is an Islamist, armed resistance-based group in Palestine that do not recognize Israel as a state. Meanwhile, Fatah is a more secular, more negotiable, and this group recognize Israel as a state. So how these two groups actually respond to this normalization of economic relationship between Israel and Palestine. For Hamas, when we do this, we are going to delegitimize and weaken Hamas' legitimacy and presence, because Palestinian Hamas, you need to understand that they have launched a lot of attacks against Israeli civilians and soldiers through series of suicide bombing and rocket attacks. Through economic normalization, Hamas will significantly lose the ability to recruit jihadists or people that mostly comes from Palestinian impoverished groups, because now Israeli, by this economic normalization, will show a positive sign of willingness to reconcile. Not to mention, Palestinian people have less reasons to join Hamas rebellious movement if they are economically fulfilled, because I think this is intuitive to explain that a lot of people resort into violence, resort into rebellious movement to against the authority when they are at the dire needs, when they have nothing to lose, when they are already desperate with their economic condition. So at the point that they are more economically fulfilled, they are going to be less likely to buy into the narrative of rebellious revolt conducted by Hamas as a group. Furthermore, Israel-Palestine economic integration presents reassurance that Israeli will not attack Palestinian recklessly due to shared collective assets to be maintained. But how does this policy respond to Fatah? So we're also going to say that strengthening leverage over long-term peace deal with Fatah will exist, which is, it's important to talk about negotiation with Fatah because Fatah is a more negotiable actor than Hamas. And Palestinian currently feels justified to demand more territorial control in two-state solution as compensation for the economic disenfranchisement. So that's what happened right now. Comparatively, when we do this economic normalization, providing economic means to them could tone down and legitimize these claims in future negotiations, because now they cannot say that they are currently economically oppressed, therefore they need to have economic agency within a framework of a state, when we already provide them economic means without them having independency. So the narrative of independency, liberation, freedom of self-determination of Palestine will be toned down and will not get that much of attraction, because now we can justify our action to not give them independence by saying we already give them economy and we already protect some needs of their human rights, which is one of it, economic needs. So that's for the government side. For the opposition side, you can explain that the reaction from Palestinian authorities will not be as wonderful as what the government side explained. There are three ways that you can explain. Number one, to explain that it's a mismatched solution to achieve peace. If peace is what government side wants to have, because economic normalization would not solve the underlying 5 decades plus hostilities between Israel and Palestine that are inherently rooted from religious wars, land dispute, conflicting conception of both nations' right of self-determination. Therefore, economic partnership would not automatically bring end to the complex nature of this national, political, territorial, cultural, religious war. these types of analysis is extremely important to mitigate a lot of analysis from government bench, because government will be always going to talk about how this will improve things, how this will reconcile both parties, how this will bring ends to the hostilities. However, if you can explain in the opposition that the problem is much more complex than economy, then government will not be that easy and as smooth to bring this argument into the table. The second thing to explain in opposition is to also mention that counterproductive empowerment of Hamas will exist in government bench, because economic normalization with Palestine, especially in Gaza Strip that is controlled by Hamas, would strengthen their power, because now Hamas can acquire more capital necessary to launch violent attacks funded by oil, gas, and agriculture exports. So I think these three types of commodities are already existing and becoming the comparative advantage of the Gaza Strip. However, right now it's being banned for Hamas to export a lot of their products. But when you lift the quote-unquote sanction, when you reopen the seaports, now they are allowed to do exports, and Hamas now have more capital to do more suicide bombing or do more series of rocket attacks against the Israeli. So this is not within the interest of Israeli to get a lot of these potential attacks from Hamas that is strengthened through this economic normalization process. Number three is to explain that losing bargaining chip over long-term peace talk with Fatah would exist in government bench, because at the point when Palestinian economy is already fulfilled, the only thing left to be discussed is territorial concession, something that is difficult to be considered by Israeli due to deep cultural and historical factors. So it brings back to the second area of discussion, which is that if you concede this land to the Palestine, that you are going to have a lot of political backlashes from the people, because people have the feeling of entitlement. Israeli people have the feeling of ownership to the land that they feel have been prescribed and prescripted by the Bible to them. So that's what's going to happen in the government bench when the economy already fulfilled. Then the one thing left to be negotiated is territorial concession. So in opposition, we can explain that government bench is the one that accelerate the process of we concede to the land, or government bench is the one that force Israeli to give a lot of these two-state solutions, the negotiation with the Palestine that is counterproductive to the interests of Israeli as a state and the Israeli people. So that's the third area of the discussion. The fourth area of the discussion is to explain the international response. There are three things that you can say in the government bench. A, to talk about reduction or reducing justification of boycott, divestment, and sanction movement against Israel, because economic normalization can be utilized as Israel to show their commitment in alleviating human rights conditions and treatment to Palestinian people through the provision of economic fulfillment. Thus, the acts of international BDS movement to inflict economic hardship to Israel becomes unnecessary, because Israel can frame this action of economic normalization as their improvement of human rights issue. Number two, you can also secure more economic alliances in the region, because Israel is in need of seeking investment opportunities to strengthen its entrepreneurship, startup, and technological advancement by convincing rich Arab countries, e.g. Qatar, Kuwait, and Saudi, to invest by moderating its treatment to their Islamic Arab brothers and sisters in Palestine. So to simplify, as Israeli right now, you can tell these rich Arab countries and their Arab businessmen that me as Israel have been moderating my behavior towards your brothers in Palestine. So I think you don't have to worry about my human rights treatment. You just need to have this economic partnership with me. This kind of narrative will improve the standing and the numbers of alliances of Israeli in the Middle Eastern, which has a lot of Arab Muslim majority countries. Number three, in government side of the house, you can also explain that you need to do this economic normalization to maintain US and Western Europe as strategic geopolitical alliance. Because with the rise of progressive politics in the West, example given, Democratic Party in US wins election in the last presidential contest, left-wing parties also dominate EU Parliament. There is an urgency to win their hearts and minds by showing our commitment to reconcile with Palestinian, at least economically. So you don't need to do like complete reconciliation in land agreement and political agreement, religious agreement. You just need to concentrate on this economic agreement to ensure that there is a gesture perceived by US and Western that you have improved and you've started to become moderate. So they are not going to be abandoning you because you are stubborn to be always hard on Palestine in opposition side. Meanwhile, in opposition, the international response argument that you can bring is also threefold. Number one, what happens in the government bench is that you're going to lose steady funding from the US because a lot of prominent politicians that hold top tier political positions in the Senate and House of Representatives or DPR-nya Amerika that controls US foreign policy are member of Jewish diaspora community that puts their trust on Israel as the last pure beacon of Jewish identity. So because of the history of anti-Semitism in Europe from 1600 until the end of World War II, a lot of the European Jewish people, they migrated into US to find a better economic opportunity and better living standard in US. But once they already arrive in US and they have a lot of kids and they have built a lot of businesses, they have made it to become the top of the political structures in the US, they still hold true to the Jewish identity. So most of them right now becomes a lot of important people, a lot of people with businesses and people that hold political power in US. Therefore, the act of economic normalization in the government bench would be perceived as Israeli succumbing and compromising and giving up its Jewish Israeli interest to the Palestine, thus reducing US foreign policy support on Israeli economy and security affairs. Because it feels like when Israeli do this economic normalization, a lot of US Jewish diaspora senators are going to feel like it's a disappointment. It's dissatisfying for them to see that Jewish Israel is no longer quote unquote pure in the way that they react against Palestine in economic way. Number two, Middle Eastern. Trading partner is already attracted to collaborate with Israeli regardless, and in both sides of the house this will happen because multiple Arab Muslim majority countries growingly started to be more pragmatic to prioritize economy over Islamic solidarity. There are a lot of examples on this analysis. For example, UAE, Bahrain, and Sudan that are Muslim majority, but they already normalized their economic relationship with Israeli, despite its abuse on Palestinian people, because these countries, they have started to become more and more economically oriented, and they don't really care about human rights and the solidarity among Muslim community. What they really care about is just money and investment mostly. And number three, European Union does not have political capital to boycott Israel. Because if government wants to talk about EU right now is the beacon of democracy and EU wants to always protect the Palestinian people, you can explain that, although that is true, but to sanction Israel, EU needs unanimous, I'm sorry, I was having a mistake there. EU needs unanimous 27 member countries vote, which will not pass with Poland and Hungary, because these two countries are already being filled by right-wing leader, and these two countries, which are the member of EU, also have strong identity of Jewish protection. They have large Jewish population in these two countries. Therefore, these two countries are already strongly allied with us, and it means that the EU resolution to sanction Israel will not pass because it requires unanimous vote, which will not happen because the two countries always are going to be our closest ally in the EU. Therefore, you don't have to worry about European Union will sanction you. So I think this is how you can navigate the fourth area of the debate, which is about international response. I hope that this post-debate analysis or this debrief is helping you to give you more insights, to give you more knowledge and information on how you can navigate IR debate, especially in the issue of Israel and Palestine. Maybe it's not much, but I hope that can be meaningful for a lot of you. And yeah, stay safe, stay healthy, and good luck for next rounds. Bye-bye. Thank you.